Okay. So this part of the session will not talk much about very details of security, but having an understanding of what are the different components and what is the architecture Sales Cloud follows for that matter or any Fusion application, right? Because the concepts what you get in this particular session can be easily uptaken to the other Fusion applications which you're working with, right? It could be an HCM application or a Fusion, ERP application, right? So, in this part of the session, we'll talk about several components in the security model which Sales Cloud implements, and this is what we'll see. We'll talk about role-based access control model, which is RBAC, and we'll talk about several components which are part of the RBAC model, and then we'll see some technical details because you need to understand what is the out-of-box behavior or what is the out-of-box visibility for any object in Oracle Sales Cloud, right? Because if you have to go ahead and customize the visibility areas of that particular object, right? So you need to understand first how you can access that. You need to understand what are the different components which is involved and how you can customize and go ahead and customize those roles or permissions or whatsoever, right? So you need to understand what is the out-of-box behavior for that. So we'll talk about some of these out-of-box behaviors in the form of data sharing modes, and we have one or two slides which talks about the tips and upgrade considerations because the security model has undergone a major change from past couple of releases, right? So firstly, to get things clear, right? So two important concepts, as everyone knows: authentication and authorization. So what is authentication? It's purely to verify your identity. Whenever you log in into Oracle Sales Cloud, you put in your credentials, either in the form of username, password, or it could be a single sign-on that you're doing, right? So all of these is basically trying to validate your identity, right? So, or even it could be web services, right? So probably you're integrating Oracle Sales Cloud with some application, right? So the application which is talking to Oracle Sales Cloud need to go and pull in some data or push some data into Sales Cloud. So you need some kind of credentials or token or cookie or whatsoever, right? So this is all ways to authenticate and prove your identity that you're the person who claim to be actually, right? Based on the kind of credentials which are provided, whether it's the access can be granted or denied by the application. So the mode of entry into the application can be numerous ways, right? So authentication is that. So authorization is basically once you authenticate. So I, as a sales rep, Lisa Jones, as a sales rep, I log in into Oracle Sales Cloud, right? What are the different areas I get access to, which is basically what am I authorized to do in Oracle Sales Cloud? Can I create accounts? Can I create quotas for my subordinates? Or can I generate reports, right? Or can I execute some web services, right? So these are several things what we call it as interfacing components, right? So functional artifacts, which if you will. So the ability to get an authorized access to any of these functional artifacts is nothing but authorization, what we call it as. So we know authentication. What is authorization? How they are related together. We're providing a user to do a specific set of responsibilities or duties on the application, which is nothing but Oracle Sales Cloud. So obviously a user, when he logs in, if he's getting an access to the application or specific functional areas, he or she is basically falling under certain set of roles and responsibilities behind the scenes. That's where, based on his role, he gets access to several functional artifacts or actions he's supposed to do on that particular application. So what are the different building blocks which are actually catering to control this complete authorization piece, right? So entitlement, right, if you call it as, which is allowing a user to get the functional access to functional artifacts or permissions whatsoever. So what are the building blocks? So if you see this example here, here we see a role-based access control building blocks where so the RBAC, the framework consists of several components or building blocks to implement the access control mechanism in the Oracle Sales Cloud. So for that matter, across the Fusion application, this model is applicable. So you see enterprise roles, you see application job roles, you see some duty roles, some permissions, privileges, all that stuff, right? So we'll get back to this picture. So I just wanted to lay out this picture for you, basically to make you understand it's not one thing which makes your entitlements work together along with the user authorization, right? So there are a bunch of things which are playing some crucial role in defining security as building blocks in Oracle Sales Cloud or Fusion applications, for that matter. So with the notion of enterprise rules, application rules, policies, privileges, all that stuff. So we'll get into one of the, we'll talk about this one at a time in the next few slides to make you better understand what these different components are. So first of all, the top thing, which is the users, right? So just recollect this picture because we'll use this picture across this presentation to basically take an analogy of the complete security building blocks. So coming to the top layer, which is users. So users, as I said, before going to users, right? So there are three main components in the role-based access control model: users, roles, and privileges. So coming to the first part of the users, even a user can be a human being, a sales rep who's logging into Oracle Sales Cloud, or it could be an application which is talking to Oracle Sales Cloud with an integration user, right? All of these are examples of users. There might be functional users or non-functional users, all right? But anything who is having a resource role is called a user in Oracle Sales Cloud. And each user has a user account associated, and obviously every user has some bunch of roles. Based on the rules, specific access is provided to the functional artifact, what we call it as. And what is role provisioning? So role provisioning, as you can see, it acts like more or less a glue between users and roles, which can be manual or automated. So you can define predefined provisioning rules using a criteria called resource roles to provision roles to users, and also to establish the fact that the users can participate in Oracle Sales Cloud transactions, right? So so before we step more into roles and stuff, so let me go back to the application and show you where these role provisioning rules are actually imposed in Sales Cloud, right? So that every user can, when a user is created, how these roles can be auto-provisioned as such, right? So let's go back and go back to the application here. So we are in the setup area, right? So as I told you, the complete setup tasks are logically divided into several functional areas here. And if I click on users and security, right? So this is one area where I think most of the session is mostly concentrating on, right? So here we are talking about creating users and provisioning roles to the users, right? So how that can be done actually, right? So before we go and step into role provisioning, let's see how users can be created first, right? What are the different things or artifacts that are required when a user is created in Oracle Sales Cloud? So for that, you can go to Manage Users and click on New here. And I'll just provide some names here, right? So please don't mind for the names here. But important things are stuff like some personal details here, and probably username, right? And you can provide user notification preferences. You want to send username and password to this email address, and person types. So since this is a training environment, you see a lot of person types here, but in your vanilla instance, when you get a trial instance, the only thing you see is employee and contingent worker, right? So others are seeded for training purposes and other stuff, but don't worry about the other part. So employee and contingent worker. So I should be an employee before I can perform some functional aspects into Oracle Sales Cloud, right? So this is where a little bit of HCM is getting overlapped here, because employee, when before you have to be a sales rep, you need to be an employee in the organization, right? So that's why we're saying this is an employee type, and legal employer is basically, you see bunch of these, but whenever you are given, so based on the provisioning questionnaire that you have filled during the instance provisioning, right, request, so there you fill in the company name. So legal entity will be suffixed to the company name, and this will be auto created during the provisioning time, right? So your company name suffixed by legal entity is nothing but your legal employer here. And the business unit, so in your case, there'll be only one business unit that will be created by default, right? So let me select, for the sake of demo, so let me select one business unit here. And these job, grade, department, location, all these are HCM related information. Let's not worry about these 5 fields, 6 fields here, right? So one thing I just wanted to say is resource role. So resource role is basically a placeholder or a role, a kind of role. I mean, it doesn't have much of value, but other than used for the provisioning, other than the, creating some or adding some provisioning information based on the role you select. Right? So let's say I want to have John Doe as probably a sales manager, right, or sales rep for that matter. So I might want to select this. So, and I can also specify the reporting manager. So when you create user, you can specify the reporting manager. So based on the reporting manager the user reports to, the organization is selected automatically, defaulted automatically, because the sales rep inherits the reporting manager's organization, right? So there could be multiple of organizations. So here we are saying if he reports to Bob Boyle, so the organization is automatically defaulted. But if you have selected the sales manager, let's say for example here, right? So you get to select an organization, because every sales manager can have his own resource organization, right? So one resource organization per manager, for every manager who has some reportees as such. So for this example, let's create a sales rep instead of a sales manager, and I click on auto provision rules. So this is an important step in user creation. The moment I click on auto provision rules, it has provisioned me a couple of roles here. Employee, because I'm an employee in this organization, it gave me an employee role. So we'll talk about what this employee abstract role is. It also provisioned me a sales rep role. So we'll talk about these roles in a bit, but let's understand the provision rules, how it can be leveraged. So the moment I click auto provision rules, two roles are automatically provisioned to me, right? So, but you might be wondering how these provision roles, these roles are provisioned to me actually. So the key thing here is the resource role that you have actually selected here. So if I go back, I'll not create the user in the interest of time, but let me go back to the users and security section in the functional area, and go and click on a task called Manage HCM Role Provisioning Rules here, right? The word seems to be a little bit of HCM kind of thingy, but this is actually a CRM or CRM task, because HCM also I think uses a similar one, right? So we said some of the tasks are common across several offerings, so that's why probably. So let's select a resource role here, right? So let's select the sales rep resource role and see what is the provisioning rule that was given to this, right? So the resource role sales rep is actually having some roles that are actually pre-created, right? So you can say basically you can create a new role mapping. For example, I don't see a role mapping resource role which is available. So probably I can create my own resource role and create my own duties for that particular resource role, right? So I'll call it as duties or responsibilities for now, right? So even though it's not an appropriate term, but I'll call it as that for now, because we didn't talk about roles in detail right now, right? So if you see, this is a mapping, right? So likewise, let's say I can create new mappings as such, right? So let me check. Let's do one more thing. Let's take sales administrator, and let's see what are the different roles which are assigned for sales administrator. For example, these are several kinds of mappings which are available. So any resource role with sales administrator, so the mapping name matches, right? So it provisions of all of these. So let's take, in our case, let's pick up one of the mapping and see what is there in this actually, right? So whenever a resource role is matched, so the respective mapping provisioning rule is executed. So this is the provisioning rule, actual provisioning rule. So what are we saying? Any user who's holding the sales administrator resource role need to have these associated roles, right? So the moment you click an auto provision button, so this is what is happening. It is matching the resource role and it is simply provisioning all the roles which are part of this resource role, right? So here it's up to you now. You can add more roles here and say auto provision checkbox here. So when you click the auto provision checkbox here, which means that whenever you click on the auto provision button in manage users in the earlier screen, right? So this role can be provisioned to that particular user, right? So this is the mapping rule which is defined. So so based on this mapping rule, that's how the user is able to gain certain roles when auto provisioning button is clicked, right? So that is what we call it as provisioning rules as such. So when you do your implementation, you need to create these provisioning rules or give the meaning to every role which is there, so that role can be assigned to the users, so that the roles which are duty roles behind the scenes gets assigned to the users. So that's roles provisioning. So now you understand role provisioning is nothing but it's like acting like a glue between your users and the roles. It's a medium to assign roles to the users, right? In the form of rules. So that's what it is. That's what is role provisioning is. And coming to the roles. So we come to the roles here. A role describes the user's function within the context of the user's organization that permits the user to access the protected artifacts of the user's organization. If you take an example here, like sales representative Lisa Jones, a role can be, it could be a sales rep role, a sales manager role, or a sales administrator role with some hierarchy of roles within it, right? Roles is not just one artifact. You can have iterative set of roles, which is nothing but role hierarchy. We'll talk about in a bit, right? So it's not one role, it can have multiple roles within one role, right? So that's by nature of RBAC model. So a single role can be provisioned to many users, and a single user can be provisioned with many roles, right? So this conversely. So this is how, this is an example of what kind of roles can be created or used or that can be assigned to users as such. So while we are in roles, let's understand different kinds of roles which exist in the application. So one is the enterprise role, another one is the application role, as you see in the slide here. So what is the enterprise role? This kind of role is basically spans across the across several Fusion application pillars, right? It could be HCM, it could be supply chain, CRM, OBI, right? So this particular kind of role, that's why it's called as enterprise role, right? So enterprise means that particular role can span across several pillars as such. So that's the nature of enterprise role. So, and this is persisted in an LDAP repository as such. And this enterprise role consists of two types. It's called two types of roles, which is a job role and an abstract role. A job role is basically to grant job functions for a particular user, and an abstract role is basically irrespective of his job function he's doing in that particular organization. For example, employee, because a user or a resource in a particular organization not only performing his sales activities, but he has to perform his employee-related activities. Probably he might want to fill in some vacation hours or leave applications. Right? So all of these come from the abstract roles, which are non-job function related, users job function related. So they're called abstract roles. So we have an enterprise role which spans across multiple pillars, and we how many kinds of enterprise roles we have? We have job role and abstract role. Job role doing job functions, and abstract role doing a non-job function as such. And the second category of role is application role. Application role is specific to a pillar, right? So when an application role is created, it is specific to HCM, specific to SCM, supply chain, or specific to CRM. So all these application roles are stored in a policy store as such, like a database you can think of, right? And application role also has things like application job role, application abstract role, which are synonymous to the job role and abstract role in the enterprise roles, right? And obviously there is duty roles. So duty roles are basically pointed to job role in internally, right? Because duty roles define specific duties which the user is performing here. Right, so these kinds of roles are probably a little bit confusing at this point. Probably once you start playing with the application, right? So this I think this will become more clearer, and the labs also talks a lot about this, all that stuff. So coming to the role hierarchy. So so what is role hierarchy? This is one of the specification in the RBAC standards. So as the name suggests, roles can be associated with other roles to form a role hierarchy hierarchy of roles, because not by nature the RBAC model is like that, because it's not one role which is comprising of everything, right? So at any point of time you should have a granular control on every duty which the user is performing. So every duty can be a particular duty role as such in the RBAC standard. So a role hierarchy is nothing but it can contain one or more roles within a role as such, right? So that you can revoke a functionality or you can add a functionality easily to gain a complete granularity or control over a specific role as such. So that's why role hierarchy is important. So now let's visualize what we learned about roles here and hierarchies, types of hierarchies. In this particular slide, we'll try to draw some picture here. So we know that there are two main types of roles, which are enterprise and application roles. The two blocks what you see here, enterprise being persisted into identity store and application being persisted into policy store, which is a database. So which we really don't mind much, right? The enterprise roles are created as mentioned in the identity store, and the second type of role, which is the application role, which is in the database as such. So these are types of roles which are created, right? So now a common enterprise role is a job role, which can be related to things like other job roles to perform hierarchy of job roles. So job roles are usually to perform job functions, right? And we said that this spans across several pillars in Fusion applications. And job roles, from where it gets its permissions or from where it gets its duty, permissions or privileges, is with the notion of application job role, right? So every enterprise job role gets its permissions with the notion of application job roles, which are specific to the pillars here. So you can see an application job role specific to HCM, specific to CRM or supply chain or whatsoever. So these roles bear the same name and the internal code as you see in the job role as such. And finally, there are a lot of duty roles which are basically catering to the granular or atomic level permissions behind the scenes. Right, so which are basically granular functions, if you call it as. They can be related to duty roles to basically form a hierarchy of roles. So now that you can visualize the role types and relationships, let's take a look at a real role model that is shipped with the Oracle Sales Cloud here. So this is a real role model. This is not an exhaustive role model as such. We have just taken a partial figure of the sales representative here. So this is a role hierarchy of the sales representative, and this is only a partial set which is shown, which is drawn in the slide here. So the topmost node, what you see here in this hierarchy, is the job role, right? So now you can visualize the topmost is a job role here, and the next node is basically hierarchy in the application job role. For the sales representative, we said that both of these carry the same code as such, but with the footprint of application job role and the enterprise job role. right? So the above one spans across the several pillars of Fusion applications, and this one specific to the specific pillar of the application. So this is an application job role, and what are these? These are the partial set of duty roles. And what does the duty role consist? It consists of permissions, which you'll see in the next slide here. So what is privileges? So we are now stepping into the third component here, right? So this is the third component as part of the RBAC model, right? Which are called as privileges, and the privileges are the most granular level in a role-based access control model as such. So they're called. That's why they're called as often called as permissions in the RBAC terminology. So a privilege determines the operation that can be performed on a protected system resource. So what are the different types of privileges that you come across? So it could be a functional privilege and it could be a data privilege. So what are these functional privileges and data privilege? So we'll see that here. So functional privilege determines the set of actions on the non-data system resources. Example, it could be tasks, it could be regions of applications you're accessing, it could be actions, it could be web services, right? So if I take a lower level example here, like view opportunity, create opportunity, or create account, or create quota, right? So these are all several actions which give you access to several portions of pages, right? So that's why we call it as a functional privilege. So if you take all these artifacts, these are nothing but several privileges. So all these privileges are given a certain privilege code here, as you see in the slide, and we will view opportunity privilege, where each of them has some separate meaning to it, right? Defining the kind of privilege it is. So this is functional privilege. So what is data privilege? Data privileges are those that basically determine the set of actions that can be performed on a system resource that only controls data. For example, if you say view opportunity data is a functional privilege, right? But if you say view opportunity data is a data privilege with some opportunity, or is it sales rep who's not even part of the account can see this opportunity? So that where condition that you're defining here, the where condition that you're defining here is nothing but what we call it as data privilege, as to a condition applied to a function privilege, basically. Right? So which set of data you see is nothing but defined using the data privilege here. So which also has a code notation here for the data privilege here. And now what is security policy? We should have something. We should have something between roles and privileges to gel together, right? So that's nothing but security policy. So security policy is strictly a glue between the roles and the privileges, and a security policy is a unique association between the application role and a privilege. So very simple, to keep it simple, right? It's basic. Security policy is nothing but it's like an entry in your database table, which is our policy store, which basically links a role identifier with a privilege identifier. Because you need to have someone to say this role can access these set of privileges, right? So this security policy is one such entry which says that which role identifier can access this particular privilege as such, right? So this is like an entry, creating an entry between your role and the privilege. So each application role can include one or more of these security policies as such. So since we talked about privileges, there is function privilege and data privilege. Similarly, you have security policies which cater to functional privilege and data privilege, which are called as functional security policy and data security policy. So what is a functional security policy? Is nothing but saying who can do what, right? So the word who basically represents an application role, and the word what represents a privilege here. So for example, if you take a role of an opportunity sales manager, which is an application role, right? Or you can take something called create opportunity, which is a functional privilege. So creating opportunity is just a functional privilege, and opportunity sales manager is an application role. Now you put together, right? An opportunity sales manager, a user who's in an opportunity sales manager can create an opportunity. So this is nothing but you're creating a security policy entry, combining these two things here, right? Basically saying that this particular person can do this particular set of functional privileges as such in the security policy, with the notion of security policy. So coming to the data security policy, right? So it's basically the where condition that you're defining for your functional security policy as such, right? So as I mentioned, it looks like a SQL-like, basically. So if you take example of opportunity sales manager can view opportunity, but when he can view an opportunity, if the particular user is in a management chain, or if he's in an account object, sales team, or whatsoever, right? So it can be anything. So that who can do what on which set of data that you're defining, that is the condition you're defining, is nothing but your data security policy here. So the data security policy is basically trying to put a condition on which function privilege the user has access to, right? So now if we come back to the same picture what we started off with, right? So now if we reiterate, now we know several artifacts now. So if we reiterate the whole slide which we started off with, we talked about Lisa Jones, and she's a sales representative, and Lisa Jones, she gets an enterprise job role, which is nothing but a job role called sales representative. And we also said Lisa is also an employee, and she gains an abstract role in the organization. So this is called enterprise abstract role as such, right? So Lisa Jones has a sales rep job role and an employee abstract role. And we also learned that about application role, which basically span across functional application sources like CRM, HCM, or whatsoever, right? So sales rep in CRM application source will have application job role with the same name as the enterprise job role. Likewise for employee, application abstract role, the same name like enterprise abstract role. And further, the sales reps having duty roles like sales representative having duty roles like opportunity sales representative, sales opportunity report creation duty role, or it could be account creation duty role. It could be anything, any set of duty roles. So these are like duties or grander level functions specific to the job role which is defined here. So then we also learned about privileges here, right? So privileges are very granular in nature, because end of the day, a bunch of privileges put together can correspond to a duty role with the notion of security policies, right? So these privileges are very granular in nature: close opportunity, create opportunity, delete account, create account, or create opportunity team, view opportunity team. These are nothing but individual granular privileges, where the functional security policies attach these privileges to the duty roles with the notion of the security policy entry, what we see. And similarly, the data security policies also with a condition. A condition defined on a functional security policy assigned to the role is nothing but a data security policy here. And similarly, which the right hand side goes with the similar concept here, right? So the policies which are specific to the abstract role line of business as such. So, starting with release 10, Oracle Sales Cloud provides a predefined set of job and abstract hierarchies that should not be modified. They are called reference roles. So why we have done this? Because we wanted to have a clean reference at any point of time, and this is a major change which has been undergone in the last couple of releases. And this simplified model, reference role model, also ensures that your customizations are preserved over a time. And with the simplified reference role model, now the implementers has an ability to copy roles, copy hierarchies very quickly, which they have not seen in the past, right? So this simplified reference model is helping them doing that, and also giving them a visual representation of the new security the new reference model with the help of the security console, which was launched a couple of releases back, right? And going forward, the reference rule mechanism is the way going forward for which the product management tries to project, because the old model of hierarchy gets deprecated over the next couple of releases at least, right? So we want everyone to move on to the new reference role model architecture as such. So while we're talking about, so that's the RBAC model we talked about. We talked about enterprise roles, we talked about application roles, we talked about duty roles, we talked about permissions, security policies, right? So several components in the RBAC. So now, if we apply some of these, so that's what we call it as data sharing modes. Because leveraging all these artifacts here, you're creating a visibility for every business object, or if you call it as a resource object in Oracle Sales Cloud. So RBAC being a center here, right? So you have several resource objects like teams, resource hierarchies, territories, partners. So how these different resource candidates gets access to several business objects that are created in Sales Cloud is through with the help of the RBAC model that we have seen. So this is an example of opportunity schema model, right? So this is a representation of opportunity data model where you can see various data sharing modes are available. So the data sharing modes are basically, if you recollect the circles picture earlier, these are nothing but the resource objects, what we call it as, right? So partner resource, opportunity resource, sales account resource, territory resource, right? So the schema which is associated to manage the opportunity sales team is opportunity resource schema. For the partner team, accordingly, account team, territory team, right? So these are several data models or schemas which basically associated to different different artifacts in the RBAC model. So the entries within these tables actually say whether a user has a visibility into a specific object or not. In this case, an opportunity, right? So if you talk about several of these data sharing modes, right? So we'll see a bunch of these here. So here we are talking about how visibility comes into picture given a scenario, and this is the out-of-box behavior that you see in Oracle Sales Cloud. So the given scenario here is there is an opportunity, and there are 3 members who can access the opportunity, but each of these 3 members has different access to the opportunity, because David Murphy has a full access to the opportunity, Karen and Tim has an edit access to the opportunity. So users who are explicitly on the team can see the opportunity record. David Murphy is the record owner, right? He's the opportunity owner basically, and the record ownership is basically a special kind of implementation of the team sharing mode. As a record owner, he has full access to the record, the way Karen and Tim doesn't have, right? So Karen and Tim has edit access because they're just part of the sales team. They're not the owners, so that's where they get the edit access. So now, if you visualize this, right? If this can be converted into a data security policy, that means a sharing mode. You can see here what the data security policy says is any person who holds the sales rep application job role can view opportunity where he or she is working for an opportunity as a team member with view, edit, or full access. So your data security policy can say something like this. So this is the out-of-box policy that's applied to the opportunity team as such. So if you go a little bit further, so here you see account coming into picture. So who inheritance, the inheritance of visibility from account comes, it follows through till the opportunity level. So if you see here, users who are explicitly on the account team can see the related opportunity records, so which we call it as team selling. Here the account team basically ran Raj and Mary here. One has full, a couple of them are edit access because Ryan is the account owner. So similarly, this visibility is inherited into the opportunity as well. So users who are on the sales account team can see the opportunity records related to that specific opportunity. So in the opportunity team, it need not be mentioned explicitly that Raj, Mary and Ryan can access this opportunity. It's implicitly taken because they are already part of the account team. So which means that they have access to the opportunity also accordingly, right? So this is the inheritance from the account object that you see into the opportunity. And one more data sharing mode use case is resource hierarchy. So here users who are explicitly on the team can see the opportunity record, which is very much valid, right? So which we have seen in the previous cases. But users like managers, right? Sales managers like John Doe, who is not part of this opportunity, but his team member, who is David Murphy, is the record owner, which means that John Doe also has access into this opportunity in an implicit manner, not an explicit manner, because John Doe will not be seen as part of the team, but still he has access into this particular record because he is the reporting manager of the resource who's having the full access into the opportunity, right? So this is a resource hierarchy use case. And if you club things together, you have a resource hierarchy plus sales account team. It's the same way. If John Doe is a reporting manager to a team member called Ren who has full access into the account, right? Which means that John Doe can also have an implicit access into the opportunity also, right? Because he has implicit access into the account, which means that the inheritance falls into the opportunity also. So John Doe here, in this case, can also access the opportunity. Again, this is an out-of-box thing, which can always be adjusted within the RBAC components by defining your own custom security model as such, right? And so this is an example for territory team, right, where we say Matthew Lopez and John Doe, they're part of some territory team here, and there's one more territory team called Zen and Hassan here, and there is an opportunity which is created in California territory, and who can access the opportunity record here across the territory hierarchy. Members can access this particular opportunity, but the peers cannot access this opportunity because they are peer territory teams, right? They're not in the territory hierarchy of California. East is not in the territory hierarchy of California, so whoever owns the East territory will not be able to see the opportunity record, whereas across the territory hierarchy, people can either see explicitly or implicitly that particular opportunity record. So these are all out of the box security policies which are given for you as per the when you get an instance of Oracle Sales Cloud. So you don't need to do anything for that. Only thing is you need to understand what is the behavior at several scenarios, right? Although they can be adjusted. So same goes with the account and the opportunity. So I'll not go through this example once again. It's a bit. So we just covered all the sharing mechanisms here, but recall that even though the sharing mechanism exists, the corresponding permissions of their use must be granted to the user through the role-based access control model. So in this slide, you can see several of these conditions which actually authorize the ability to view opportunities through the sharing mechanisms here. So, so you can see here where they're a user, even though he has, how he gets access to a specific opportunity is if he's part of a sales team member, having some view editor full access, or if he's part of account team member, or if he's part of territory team, or if he's part of partner team, right? So the schemas here associated to these resource objects are basically trying to say that if you are a member of this particular schema or an entry into the table of this associated schema, you get access to a specific object, right? So the associated schema is giving you this complete access, all access behind the scenes for the business object, which is trying to gain visibility. The resource is trying to gain visibility into it. So that's in fact about different data sharing modes or visibilities, I would say. So the next part is you understood what is the out-of-box model, you understood what is an RBAC model, you understood what are the components within the RBAC model, and we very much know that Oracle Sales Cloud implements the complete RBAC model into its security model. But what are the tools which we have to control this model, right? So that's what we see in the slide, where we have Oracle Identity Manager, Authorization Policy Manager, Security Console. These are tools which basically allow you to access these artifacts, which we have seen, and try to customize these artifacts if required, if it doesn't suit the out-of-box functionality which Oracle Sales Cloud gives, right? So you can use these tools. But let me tell you, OAM, Oracle Identity Manager, Authorization Policy Manager, all this comes bundled part of the Oracle Sales Cloud application. You're not doing additional subscriptions. These are all part and parcel of Oracle Sales Cloud application. But one thing to be remembered is going forward from the next releases, we will be cutting off the access to the Oracle Identity Manager and the Authorization Policy Manager completely, because everything needs to be gone through the Security Console, which was the new console which was created to make the life easier for the implementers, because we have seen a lot of implementers giving feedback that APM is a little bit tough to understand, or OAM is a little bit tough to understand. It obviously we understand that. So a Security Console is the notion or the go-forward strategy to completely control the RBAC component model in Oracle Sales Cloud, right? So that's the reason we'll talk about Security Console in a little detail in the form of the demo, right? So, but OAM and APM, you'll be doing labs related to that, so I'll not spend time on that in the interest of time. So we'll talk about Security Console, which is a new addition in the past release. And you'll certainly appreciate some of these things if you have worked with the past releases. So how do you touching upon the Security Console, how do you basically set up a Security Console, right? So not much of things needed. You need to just take care of a couple of profile options, AC role management preference and AC working apps type assets, because you need to say that you're trying to basically using these two options. I'll put it at a very layman. You're trying to say that you're applying the Security Console to the CRM application and not to any others, right? So because the same Security Console might not be available in the other Fusion applications, right? So that's why we're saying we are striping off this Security Console for the CRM application. So more or less the couple of profile options do mention this particular thing. So now let's go back to the application and see how you can access the Security Console here. So you can access the Security Console from the application menu, or you can go to the simplified user interface and access the same. So if you click a home icon, this is basically taking you to the simplified user interface of the application. So it will be in tools. If you have configured, if you have added this Security Console app into this particular category, it will appear here, right? By default, this appears in this particular thing. So I can launch the Security Console either from this particular thing, or I can go to app navigator menu. Many ways actually. If this is not enabled here, you can go ahead and adjust the structure. So we'll see that in the application composer customization or day after tomorrow. So you access the security console. So we'll do a quick thing on what are the different things you can do in the security console. Right. So remember, as part of RBAC, we have seen enterprise roles, application roles, duty roles, privileges, right? Security policies. So these are several artifacts which we have seen. So how do you create role? So all of these roles are available for you actually, right? So you need, if you want to, if you wanted to assign a specific sales rep or a sales manager or a sales administrator, all of these roles are available and privileges related to these roles are available, right? You actually don't need to do anything apart from assigning these roles to the users using the provisioning rules, right? But one thing, why you wanted to understand this a little bit detail is because sometimes you might wanted to create roles, custom roles, right? Where the out-of-box functionality is not enough for you, right? In which case, you might wanted to create a new roles completely, right? So in that case, you can create role. So here, I can create something called inside sales rep. Sorry. Okay. So let me put this here, role code, and I'm trying to create some simple custom role here. And if you see here, role sources, external role and application role. Remember, we talked about this in the picture, right? So external role is nothing but your enterprise role. Application role is specific to the application pillar as such. So let's say in this case, I just wanted to create an external role, and here I wanted to say what kind of role it is, because application role you can have job role and duty role, and application role you can have job role and abstract role, and job role, duty role, and abstract role, and external role you can have job role and then abstract roles, right? So here I go ahead and select CRM job role, and so this is like a wizard driven, right? So data security policy is, you can safely ignore this. This is added to basically to support a backward compatibility as such. But you can add more roles since you're doing an application role, right? So sorry, external role, which is an enterprise role, right? So you might want to add roles based on the nature of the role you're trying to do. Let's say I don't want to add roles at this point, but here again, adding users is also, you can ignore this. You can go and add users from manage users, what we've seen earlier, right? So you can ignore this as well, and this goes to the last, right? So creating role is simple actually, so because this is just an enterprise role we are creating, but this is not probably a valid case for you guys actually. There might be something interesting which you might wanted to really do. Let's say what I wanted to do is, often we end up saying I wanted to create a role which is like a sales representative role, but I don't want certain things which Sales Cloud is giving me as part of sales representative role. So what do I do, right? So these are common scenarios which you guys come up, which customers generally would need, right? So so what I do next? So I wanted a sales representative role, but with certain exceptions into that particular role, right? Because I wanted to fit to my customers' needs. So I can go and search for sales representative, and what I can do is, based on the kind of role you're taking up, either external role or application role. Let's say I wanted to create a sales representative application role similar to the out-of-box sales rep role, right? So first thing I can do is I go and select this, right? So one thing I can do is I can go and copy this role. So this will certainly be appreciated by people who have worked with past releases, because there's no copy concept in the earlier releases, right? But at least with the security console, you have ways to copy roles, compare roles, simulate roles as such, right? So here, what my intention is to copy a role, and copy a role similar to sales representative, but with only minimal set of functionalities to that sales rep, because that's what my customer needs, right? So I can copy a top role, or I can say copy the top role and along with the inherited roles, which means that you're saying copy all the duty roles along with the application role, right? So I wanted to take a deep copy here. So here, I just make it as a name, as role name, as sales representative copy, just for understanding, right? And I go through the wizard, so which we have seen earlier. So here, since I made a copy, right, so it's bringing up all the functional security policies this particular out-of-box role holds. Now, it's now easier for me to take out things from this existing role or add things to the existing one, because I'm not starting from scratch here, right? Let's say I wanted to just knock off the, let's say I wanted to knock off certain functional security policies, like I'm just taking randomly things here, right? So I just wanted to knock off some of things here, right? So I can go ahead and knock off these, right, straight away. Coming to the data security policies, which is the next step, right? So I can create and data security policies. In the out-of-box role, there's no data security. That's why it's not showing up anything. But you can add more data security policies right away from this page here. And in case you wanted to add hierarchy of roles here, you can still do that by adding multiple roles, right? Or else you can get rid of the existing roles if you wanted, if you're not interested, and go next. And so what you're doing here is you're trying to create a customized sales representative role specific to the specific to basically your customer needs here, right? So this is one simple example of generally your implementers will try to face, right? So now there are several things actually you can do. You can compare roles, right? So sometimes you wanted to see, I wanted to see what a sales representative has, what a sales manager has versus a sales representative does not have, right? So you might wanted to compare these roles and see if I have to give any additional roles to sales reps to reduce the job of the sales managers, right? So I can do salesman. I can just simply select the, okay, there's a spell check here. So let's say I pick up the sales manager application role, and I wanted to compare these two roles, and I can say do an all compare, or say I wanted to check only in second role, which means that it shows all the roles which are only the second role and which the sales rep does not have, right? So I can quickly, this gives me a very quick understanding that okay, my sales manager does not have a role to create quota. He does not have a role to create territories, right? So I can quickly assign these roles to the sales reps, right? So this is a productive way to understand in several ways, right? So you can do an all compare, you can do a first role compare, second role compare in both roles, right? So sometimes you wanted to see, equate and see what the differentiation between these two roles, right? So you can do many kinds of comparisons here, and with respect to filter criteria also, like function security, data security, and you don't want to compare any inherited roles, right? Because role hierarchy might be a little bit iterative in nature. So all that can be done through this particular interface here. So you can compare roles, you can create roles, you can do a deep copy of roles as such, and you can also edit an existing role, but always editing a existing role is not suggested at all, because the only reason is any changes which Oracle makes to the application of Oracle Sales Cloud will be made to the base install, which means that any changes, let's say tomorrow the dev team feels that, the PM team feels that some more duty roles needs to be added to these sales representative application role, right? So if you go and edit this particular role straight away, so when the new application update comes up, right? So you might lose your customizations that you've made, right? So that's why it's always strongly suggested you do a copy of this role and then do whatever changes you wanted, because you can do a shallow copy or you can do a topmost copy whatsoever, right? So don't edit this role ever, right? So always do a copy of this role and try to make your additions or deletions or whatsoever based on the requirements as such. So that's about the edit roles, and one more, Simulate Navigator is one interesting feature. So Simulate Navigator is basically this is one nice way to understand, to get an access to a specific navigator menu. What is the role I need to have, right? So this is often a confusion a lot of times. So let's say I wanted to give a specific access to this particular navigator item called Application Composer, right? So what roles that grant access? So you want to view all roles that grant access, right? So there's a bunch of roles which grant access to these application roles. So these are not straight roles, because some of them might be inherited, right? So that's why it's showing up all of these roles. So you might want to understand this and see, okay, I need to give probably implementation consultant role to this particular user so that he gets access to the application role, because this is one of the roles which the setup user might need, right? Likewise, you can go to every menu item and try and see if a specific access needs to be given based on the role that it suggests as such. So this is one nicer functionality that you can quickly see, and you can always do a quick expand, right? So all that stuff, collapse, and you can magnify, or you can go into focus, all that stuff, right? So set as focus, and you can. This will be a little bit animated in nature, and I can go and if sometimes there are too many circles, right? You'll not be able to see. You have a magnifying glass here to basically go ahead and see that, or else there are a lot of tools, tools to magnify and demagnify, all that stuff. Yeah. Okay. So so that's about the security console, right? So, but this is not it completely, I would say, because there are a lot of things you guys need to understand. So they're incorporated as part of labs. So one other thing is user and role access audit report. So you can get reports from going to the navigator menu and schedule processes. So the schedule process will basically a container for a list of pre-seeded jobs for you, right? Where you can trigger the job based on the schedule you wanted. So once a job is a job or process, if you will, right? So it's creating a user and role access audit report. So it basically says which user has which role as such, right? So that kind of audit report can be gotten. So that basically gives the project manager a visualization of what every business user, what kind of roles which are granted, what roles with the setup users were granted, what roles implementation users were granted, what roles sales users were granted, right? So this audit report gives you a whole bunch of things. So this report can be generated based on the role name as such. So specific role name can be taken, or a username can be taken, and you can generate that report. So it gives you, once you trigger this, right? So a process will be created for you, and once the process is completed, it shows a completed status, and you see attachments down here, right? So it shows a bunch of attachments. So the output of this particular job is attached some bunch of files, which is basically, you can find this in section. So if you click on that, this is a zip file which has a few set of files, right? So if you open one of the files, right, this is what kind of an audit report which you can do some data mining on it and try and see which specific role is given to a bunch of users, right? So based on the job role name, you can find out based on the job role, right? So you can find out which users have got this particular job role as such. So to do an audit on this particular complete security model which is there. So custom object security, I will not cover here. So Shubhani will be covering as part of the application composer, right? But we'll talk about upgrade best practices, which is one slide, so this is a doc ID 209.5916.1. So this is a common doc ID for most of the sessions what we do, where you need to go and check what is the upgrade which is done, what is in release 11 and what is the upgrade considerations you need to take care, right? So as part of that, reference role model is you need to see what is the upgrade consideration which is taken here. So here, so if you, as I mentioned earlier, right? So when your environment is upgraded to the release 11, a new simplified reference model is installed during the upgrade. So the simplified reference model coexists with the pre-existing role models that are preserved through the upgrade here. So the important key takeaway is the reference role model is introduced for your clean references as such to give you a nicer way of enterprise role and application role to be striped off nicely per pillar or across pillars, all that stuff. So Security Console is giving you access to all these, and APM is also giving you access to all this. While we are doing that, right, so we are not forcing the existing customers to move this to this model, but what we're saying is going forward, this is the reference role model will be used or will be updated or upgraded very frequently for new features and everything. So you might want to ask your customer if he's on older releases to move on to the new role model. So for that, ideally the customer need not do a lot of things, a lot of stuff here, right? So basically, there's a reference upgrade guide which we have given where we are saying that you need to detach the existing link between the existing job role and the application role, and you need to create a link between a new entry or a link between the new job role and the application job role. So that's what, because the entire hierarchy is taken out and mapped to the new job role, right? So you need not do much about that. So so that's as simple as that, right? So which basically takes care of the complete hierarchical structure behind the scenes for you, right? And always suggested as in the slide, so never make a copy, never do a direct edit on the existing hierarchy model. Always take a copy of it and try to do a deep copy if possible, and then try to make changes so that your existing existing role hierarchies are not affected as such, right? So so this is so let's say you have a customizations from your for your customer, right? So this is what it happens. So you move your customizations to the copied role model. So let's say you have a job role. This is the existing hierarchy, right? So you have made a copy of this hierarchy here using the deep copy functionality. And now the existing job role what you have, right? So can be mapped to the customized application job role, right? So that's the linkage you can create. This is the similar way you do for the migration also, actually, right? So so this is the similar way you do it for your migration. If at all you have done some customizations, right? So we have given several use cases of how you can do that, but this is a simple kind of customization, and moving your customizations is what is mentioned in the slide here. So so this is the same slide which talks about this bunch of points what we earlier discussed. So I'll not go through the slide once again. But the security additional references documentation is important for you because you can understand what are the different roles, duty roles, privileges which are available as part of the sales code application, right? So you can go and understand each of these roles in detail by referring through these guides as such. And this is additional rows, so you can go to Fusion Apps OER. This is one more place which reroutes to a new link from past 5-6 months. So where you can get this like assets which are basically curated for you, which are available part of the Sales Cloud, right? So these curated assets you can always go and discover the specific asset and try and understand the details of it, right? So that's one. So let's do a quick quiz. So let's take 2 more minutes and we'll do a quiz here. So let's just do, I'm not sure how many questions are there, so let's do a couple of questions here and try and understand. So users and security, while creating a user, which are the mandatory attributes? So if you have snapshotted the manage users page which I showed you, so you'll certainly answer this question. Certainly it's not all of the above. All of you are giving only one answer actually. There are multiple answers in this. So because some of these attributes are mandatory, not just one. Okay, so I received very few guys have given the correct answer and partial answers, I would say. So, but the answer is email address is mandatory while creating a user, and the person type, remember we said employee or contingent worker, and business unit also is business unit.